hear me? Cool. Thanks for having me here today. My name's Ade Adebiyi, as mentioned. I'm a UX UI designer at a company called Oak, formerly Orchid Software, and I've been designing emails for about 5 years now. Can I have a show of hands to see who loves designing emails? Who designs emails on a daily basis? There are, wow, so many of you. I can't believe this. I'm going to get through this great. This is an introduction to modern email best practices. And yeah, here we go. So the slides, if I'm going too fast, there's a few links here, but they're available on my website and it will be available as well on Frontend Northeast. If I do fumble, it's because of nerves. So be nice to me, please. So yeah, before I start, I'm going to try and get through this as best as I can. There are going to be things where I may not go over, things some of you may be after, might not be touched upon, so feel free to tweet me, tap me, wherever, and ask me questions afterwards. But there'll be a few resources here as well. So I'm going to start on what I say basic fundamentals. I'm not going to get too deeply on code here today. I'm going to just be talking about how to just design really good emails. So the first part of fundamentals, as we all know, is emails are predominantly built on tables. And that's one of the main stigmas of email. People are like, I want to use divs, but you can't because you have to use tables. So the reason you have to use tables is because of Outlook 2007, 10, 13, which don't support divs. You all probably know this. I don't know. But that's the main reason. And HTML tables are the safest way to maintain a structure with emails. Email has a lot of legacy because it's been around for quite a while. So we've got any modern, flashy divs, and we can't use that because you've got like Outlook 2001, and that doesn't work with divs, and problems can start. Another thing I'd say with just the fundamentals and with layouts is this is a bit controversial, but to comment in your code. When someone else is going into your code, you can have a comment, as you can see in the green, which is the start of the first row, and the end of the first row. That's just so where people know where they are. So if someone's going back into your code at a later date, they can just be like, okay, that's the first, and then the start and the end of the row. And that's helpful when you're doing more complex things in email. So eventually you're going to be doing a lot of tables within tables within tables, so that you can tell them this is the start of the navigation, it's the end of the navigation. So I do recommend comments. I would recommend to code within the TD, which is the table cell, and just so that it's just better to access as well. Cool. The second part is to inline your CSS. Again, one of those things that puts everyone off email. They think, wait, why do I have to inline my CSS when I can just use like modern web design practices? And the reason being, again, is because of legacy, and also mostly because of Gmail. Gmail is starting to support style sheets, but it's still having a bit of problems. But for consistent support, it's best to inline your CSS. And I've got an example here of a table or table style. And what you do with a more normal style sheet is you'll just have the table style at the top, and that would apply to every single table in your layout, or you could do that with a div. But with email, you would have to inline that and add that into every single, every single, okay, so every single opening, I'll get there. Every single opening table, you would have to add a inline style, and it can be very tedious. However, there are frameworks that Kerry will get onto, and inliners out there that could do most of the hard work for you. So another thing is I'll get onto it in more detail later, but don't rely entirely on frameworks. I'd say the reason being is so that you can know how the code is made as well. I'm not saying don't use framework, of course they're brilliant, but obviously know how it's done, as well as using frameworks as well. You can use both. Third part, I'm needed there, is to preempt by making your tables foolproof. So as you saw in the last slide, I had a bit of a code within the table class, and it's basically because tables are built fundamentally for displaying tables of data. They can be a bit temperamental when trying to structure layouts. So and a lot of other clients could like to add their own little quirks into it. So Outlook would add extra spacing here. They think they're fixing it, but actually breaking it. And if you just want a blank slate, there's things you can add to just improve on that. So I've got an example here of just resetting the table style. So within the opening tag of my table, I've got role presentation. What role presentation does, it's makes your tables be makes your I'm gonna get there. It's gonna get you make your tables be treated more like a div-based layout. So it's just better for accessibility. And that's something that you can read up on by Rebel Mel, and Mark Robbins, if you haven't heard of him, is a very, very well-known and very, very talented email developer and designer. And another thing I've done is, again, I've inlined my style. I've got border collapse, so that it gets rid of any spacing, as well as MSO styles, which I'll get onto again, which are mostly for Microsoft Outlook. This will be again available if you want to have a look at it in more detail. And the last part is to display block your images. And the reason being is Gmail and other clients like to add extra spacing around images. So adding display block just means that it gets rid of any space. So if you're dealing with two images next to each other, display inline block works just fine. Everyone okay? Cool, it's just really silent, so I was like, okay. Oh,
so how
I'm gonna get there. So the main stigma with email is how can I use it with Outlook? Have you ever had a problem with Outlook designing emails? Just 3 of you. That's weird. I think a lot more would. So I was looking for ways to explain how email works with Outlook and how you can work with Outlook, and I stumbled across this video by Jen Simmons. It's a video you can find on YouTube, and it's based on real art direction on the web. I think she's brilliant. I think the video is brilliant, but she's actually talking about using CSS grid with Internet Explorer, but for some reason it just fit perfectly with email. So every time she says Internet Explorer, just think Outlook, and you'll get through this brilliantly, I promise you. So here we go.
How are we going to use any of these technologies when IE still exists? There's this idea that we have sometimes where things either work or they don't work, and you can use them or they don't use. You can choose not to use them, and so you get this matrix. And you want to use it because you want it to work, but it doesn't work everywhere because IE. So then you use it, and it doesn't work, and you get fired or you get covered in bugs, and that's not good. So you just have to choose to never use any of these things, but that's not good. The problem is not IE. The problem is this box. This is not the reality of what is going on. This is the reality of what's going on. You can use it and not use it at the same time. It works and it doesn't work at the same time. It's quantum CSS. And this is where the unicorn kitten lives. The unicorn kitten lives in the use it and don't use it at the same time box. You don't have to decide to use it. Like, you don't have to wait 8 years. That's the nature of CSS. So, hey, 5% of your people get the experience on the right. It's okay. They don't have viewport unit support. No big deal. Only 12% of the people see the drop cap. 88% of the people see the old. They don't know that they're missing something. It's fine.
And yeah, so 0% with IE, but that's how it is. But I thought that's just a great way to sum up email. I know she wasn't even talking about email. She probably doesn't like email, but it's just, I was just like, I'm going to use that in my presentation. I put that in there the day before, and I was like, brilliant. So yeah, and it's just, people think that because it doesn't work for Outlook, I'm just going to completely neglect it and I'm going to completely change what I'm designing for. But what you do is it's a constant compromise and just working with Outlook and other browsers for what you're doing. So that brings me on to the next part of my talk, is who are you designing for? And it's getting to know your audience. Again, you're thinking, I'm a designer or a developer, what are you talking about? And you can use a lot of these stats to just kind of improve on your design, improve on just understanding how your subscribers work. Also, what devices are they opening them in? Are they mostly opening them in Apple Mail? If you've got an Apple-based product, that means that you can kind of push the boundaries a bit more. If they're opening them mostly on a Microsoft system, so on Outlook, then you might not be able to have that hamburger menu in there. So just a few things. On 3 of the most popular browsers as a whole, you've got Gmail, which is constantly improving. It's the second most opened email client, and one thing you should know is that Gmail displays the pre-header, and what that means is you have to have a bit of code underneath your main HTML just to say, kind of, don't miss out, this is a promotion. if you don't do that, then it's just going to show a bit of your HTML code, and it looks really ugly. If any of you's got an email from your Gmail account or Apple Mail account, and it just says the main title, which is like summer sale, and underneath that you'll see like div alt tag. It's just like, oh, what are we doing? But so yeah, Gmail. Just bear that in mind. Another thing is with the recent upgrades of the Gmail app, it doesn't show the full width of the email, so it gets cropped a little bit. You've again probably seen these when you open an email, you're like, that's not showing everything in my Gmail app. By adding this snippet of code here, which is u plus body tag min width 100 vertical width, that just fixes that. We come into Apple Mail, which is the best, I'd say, for designing emails, because it just looks 90% of the time you do something and it looks how you want it to look and how you expect it to look. And one thing that really pisses off most people when they're designing for email is you've got something in your head how you want it to look like, and it's just not like that. There's like reality and expectation, and it's just miserable. So yeah, and another thing I just wanted to point this out is Position Absolute no longer works with Apple, and you might not think that's a big deal, but Position Absolute was awesome because you can do fake parallax emails and so many things with Position Absolute, but you can't do that anymore with the new iOS upgrade. And the reason being that I'm bringing this up is because the technology is constantly changing. Apple's always trying to improve, or Microsoft's always trying to improve, and so is Gmail, and it's a constant compromise. They're gonna improve on some areas, and one feature that you're relying on for so long might be taken away. And then everyone's favorite, Outlook. Which one of you, or any of you here, read your emails in Outlook? Anyone? Quite a few of you. And people are like, oh, Outlook only has 12% of the overall email market share. But how many of you just put your hand up? That means you open emails every day and at least one's broken. And that's not from just any brand. It's a reputable brand you're opening it. There's quite a few, like, I was actually going to do a list of showing all these emails that I've opened in the last week that are broken. I was like, it's going to destroy any chance of employment I'm going to have in the future. So I left it out. But you see that common problem. And the main perception is people think because it looks great in Apple and Outlook has such a low market share, they're not going to, why bother? And you should bother. The reason being is because, let's say 1 million people open your email, and 12% of that is Outlook. That's quite a lot of people. So I'm not going to do the math, I'm nervous. So, yeah, and I just wanted to point out a few things. Most problems are caused in Outlook 2007, 10, 13, and 16. And Outlook has its own special classes. You can research this quite a bit. But one thing I want to point out, and it's a common problem, is for using something like Google Fonts, and it's working in Apple Mail, it's working in Gmail, but it doesn't work in Outlook. And what you get is Times New Roman. So if you're trying to use Arial or Helvetica, something that's actually web font, Lato, and then you get Times New Roman in mobile, it's just, wow, it just destroys everything. So one thing you can do is MSO -font -alt, and then set that to a fallback font that works, and that fixes it in Outlook. And what Outlook is just a bunch of compromises and fixes. So it does kind of bloat your code a bit because you're trying to fix things for Outlook, but then if you are coding in such a way, you can try and prevent those problems by hiding things for Outlook. There's another one called, I didn't write it here, but it's called MSO hide all, and it's quite obvious what it does. It hides everything in Outlook devices, and that's good if you have something that doesn't work. You're like, okay, well, just don't show it, and that's the end. Another thing is targeting Outlook.com. So this is a new thing that's kind of coming up. People are like, it's not working in Outlook.com, and I'm like, oh. So there's a great community out there, and there's ways you can target Outlook.com by using this. Can you see me? Yeah, you can see that good. So you can use OWA, and then have the class name, and then your classes, your properties, and then it will become this. I don't know what that means, but it fixes it. So it brings up to the next point, which is responsive versus hybrid. So responsive design, I presume we all know what responsive design is, and we're all actively practicing it. If not, then I recommend you do, please. It's kind of the future. And hybrid is something that, trusty notes. Hybrid is something that Fabio, who works at MailChimp, I forgot his second name, but he's someone that if you pay attention remotely to the email community, is one of the lead senior developers of email in the email community. He is an advocate of hybrid CSS, which focuses on using max widths and min widths and hacks to not use any styles at all, but everything will be inline, and it is pretty cool. And then the other style is responsive. Responsive is when you use fluid media, fluid grids, and media queries. And the way you can differentiate the two just easily is hybrid is more of a snap in a keyframe. So 1, 2. So 300 pixels are going to look like this, and 6,000 pixels are going to look like that. Whereas responsive is more of a longer animation. So you can see it from 600, and it's going to eventually shrink. Your images are going to change, your columns are going to change. And I'd say for simple structures to use responsive, but if you have something much more complex, then you can use hybrid as well. But to be honest, at the end of the day, it's what you feel is best for what you're working on. The joy is about design and development is there's never one solid answer. There's always a way to get to the solution. So do whatever you think is best. These are just recommendations I'm giving you. So again, mobile first is something I think you should consider. More than 50% of users open their emails on a mobile device. And first impressions are everything. I mean, there's only really, I'd say, Anna Yeaman said that only 2% of users reopen their email. And if you think about it, do you really have time to go back to a promotion you kind of don't remember about an hour later? Oh, what was that Top Man promotion again? You've deleted it, it's gone, you've forgotten about it. So you really only have one impression, and that's everything. So make sure that's why best practices are in place. So it brings me to the next point, which is dry coding. So that's actually my hand. And what dry coding is it's a pseudonym for don't repeat yourself. Try and use as little, that's the complete opposite. Try and use as little code as possible. So by creating snippets, name your classes appropriately as well. Instead of repeating your code, if you have snippets, it saves you time for writing all out again. Again, this is something you probably all applying to your web development with frameworks and stuff, but it's good to enforce these practices into email. And one thing I thought I was really smart for coming up with this, but your email is like your handwriting. Everyone has, let's start again. Your code is like your handwriting, and everyone has their own quirk. There's a way you might code that someone else on your team might not code. And just by having best practices such as snippets and comments in there, it just means that people can understand your code better, especially when it's something like email, which a lot of you might think is very foreign. It's just good to have stuff like that, and it helps you to learn different aspects of someone else's code as well. And then that brings me on to snippets. Snippets save time and stress. What's the point of writing that code I showed you at the very top about how to fix your table? What's the point of writing that 10 times and know it from memory, where you can just double click in Sublime or tap in Dreamweaver and just have it done there and then? Having snippets means that you can create a library. I recommend creating a library of just different animations, fixes to problems you've had previously. Let's say you're working on 2-column layout and it's not working in Outlook, which it will happen if it hasn't happened to you already, and you figured out how to do it. What's the point being like, what was that again? You can just save that table and then just have it for a future use. Hamburger menus are becoming more and more common within emails. You've probably seen one on your mobile device. What's the point of writing a hamburger menu 10 times where you can just have a snippet of it and just change the classes? And then there's a few places where, if you've never wrote an email snippet before, there's a few places where you can find them. For example, Litmus Snippets. There's a website that I don't know why many people don't know about this site, but it's called Responsive Email Patterns. It has so many responsive email patterns that are I tried to explain that in a better way, I couldn't, which are absolutely brilliant. I think that there'll be a help you don't have to use the code exactly, but it's good to dissect the code and you can learn something from it. And the last place as I mentioned before, having animations and snippets is Dan Eden. Um, it could be Den. I don't know. I just wrote Dan Eden, but he has a CSS animations library. CSS animations work with Android as well as iPhones. So if someone opens your email up in iPhone, you can have the logo fading in, something basic like that, and it does grab users' attention rather than just a slow loading static. Here, look at that, read it. It's having animations can wean them in better. So that brings me up to having a checklist. So an email checklist or checklist in general means that I can make the least amount of mistakes. I've made many mistakes when I've worked in email. I used to actually spell disappointed with one P, which my boss absolutely hated. And it was like fine the first 5 times. When I did it like 20, he was like, look, seriously, make a checklist, okay? Then with so a checklist is really helpful to just prevent mistakes from reoccurring. And there's always something. You may think you've coded something perfectly, but there's always something that you'd miss without even realize you've missed it until sometimes it's too late. There's been times I've sent out an email, for example, for a job application, and I've like wrote the wrong name, and you can tell that didn't go too well. So, and also mention to things you should test for is functionality. So that's if it renders on the devices you want it to render to. Does it load properly? Usability testing. Test the size of your images. Are the images too big? That means it'll take longer to load. The interface testing. Is it easy to go through the email, or is it just more of are you designing it for yourself, or are you designing it for the user? Compatibility testing. Again, how does it look like in things like Outlook, Yahoo Mail, and performance testing. How fast does it load? I'd say make a checklist that's personal for the project you're working on or issues that you constantly have, to make sure you don't do them repeatedly. However, great places that have checklists are Litmus. There's a Litmus email checklist. Pardot has an email checklist. Blue State Digital has a very good checklist as well. Last but not least, there's a site that is out there which basically goes through your email and makes sure that everything's just loading correctly and tells you if you've got any problems in your code, or you're using a strong tag instead of a B tag, and it just points out how to fix it, or you're using the wrong metadata in your email, it tells you how to fix it as well, and that's HTML email check. I've wrote it out so that you can write each of these things down, and the search results will be the same. The second part of checklist is testing. Who does email on a daily basis, or weekly basis, or monthly basis? Occasionally. Okay. Who's never done an email before? Okay. That's interesting thing to know. So with email, you basically really have to test your emails, because no matter what you do, you're going to run into something. You might have done something wrong. Email's very temperamental as well. So you may have missed the closing tag, and even though like HTML editors are becoming much more efficient at pointing that out, let's say it passed all of that, missed the closing tag, and it looks fine in Apple Mail. Because Apple's like, you missed it there, let's put that in there. However, you open it Outlook and it's just broken, it's a mess. So testing is extremely important. There's testing services out there. The first one is I'm talking about a free method. This is a really cheeky way to test, and I do not recommend this, but it's free. Is to send it to yourself via a free web service called Putsmail. And what Putsmail is, it makes you you can send an email to yourself. So okay, that's good. So if you had a Gmail account, and you had a Yahoo account, and you had a Outlook account, you've just been able to send it to your 3 different services for free, and that eliminates quite a few issues. And then let's say, all these other services had different trials. How about I set up for those trials, and then you've kind of just got 10 different services you can test it on. It's really tedious, but that's the free way. If you want to do it the free way, do that. Then there's the hobbyist, I call it, which is a really new service called testy.at. It's £10 a month, which is very cheap for email testing, and it's got quite a very good support. They've recently just added iPhone and iPhone 6, 7. They say it's in beta testing, but I emailed him and said it's done. And I asked him for a discount code, but he gave me this. which is free until the June 7th. And what you need to do is when you're on the home page, press 1, 9, and K, which is the cheat code, and then you get like a free week. I swear down, I asked him for him to just have my name, and he said, I don't have time. Here's 19K. And I was like, cool. So here is 19K, and you get it until free until June the 7th. And it's really good. It's really fast. It's good. Next one is email on acid. It's quite well known in email community. It's got email testing, email editor, spam testing, advanced analytics, email optimization, and web design preview and design inspiration. That's there as well, and it's quite affordable. Again, if you are shopping for an email testing service, these are they all have free trials, so just test them out before and which one resonates with you, go with that one. And the last one, which is the most well known, is Litmus. Litmus is kind of like the community leader when it comes to email design. It was founded in Leeds, or the person was from Leeds. It's got a really, really big community. Litmus is well known. If you really wanted to start off in email, I'd say Litmus is going to guide you through the way, as well as Email on Acid. They have very, very good blogs as well. And then that comes to consistency. So one part of email is just to make sure that everything is consistent. You want to make sure that your spacing is the same. You want to make sure that your fonts are the same. This is the same for web design. A lot of you seem more interested in their picture, and the reason I had to explain this to my fiance yesterday. The reason I chose this picture is because they have the exact same facial expression and smile and pose in every single picture. Even with Zoidberg, I thought it was brilliant. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, how could they just so many people think that's their unique experience, and it's not. It's just, I thought it was absolutely amazing, so I used that picture. But that's what you should be doing with your emails, really. Just keeping it consistent, keeping it looking the same. And there's a few ways that I've become more consistent with my design and development. There's a few very good Chrome dev tools out there. There's one called Snatcher. What Snatcher does is it snatches all the styles from a website and it shows you what they are. It tells you what the font size is, what the font name is, what the colors are. And if you're working on a brand that doesn't have brand guidelines, like, just do me an email. It's a good way just to get a good idea of what they want and how they want it to look like. The next one is What Font, which is specifically just for fonts. If you don't want to wait for Snatcher to load and show you everything, What Font would just be like, Times New Roman, and it'll just tell you. And the same with color eye picker. It'll just be like red or FF0000. It won't tell you red because that's just not possible. But and the CSS viewer is quite self-explanatory. It shows you CSS. And then spacing, I'd say, is one thing that really throws you off in email, to keep your spacing consistent with your desktop and mobile. So if you're going to go with a more material design 8-point grid, make sure that's the same amount of spacing you're applying throughout your email. And if you're going to go for a conventional 5-point grid, just make sure you're using 5 pixels here, 10 pixels here. Just make sure it adds up. Don't use like 23 pixels. It's really jarring when you see it. And there's a few blogs and articles here that I think are really good. There's 6 ways to tighten up your design. I recommend it to everyone. It's by InVision, and it just shows you just how little things you can do improves your design and development. And the reason I'm talking about design is because you can apply these design practices to your development. So if you get if you're just solely a developer, you get a visual from the designer and it's missed out the pixels, you could be like, hey, did you want it to look like this, or do you want it to look like that? 7 design tips for building successful email 2017. That's from Litmus. It's quite self-explanatory. And Marissa Mayer, who is the CEO or ex-CEO of Yahoo, she talks about a 5-point rule that she learned at Google, which is just make sure to use 5 unique elements throughout your design. I think it's brilliant, and your development as well. I thought it was just amazing. And that brings me to empathy in design. So that's just to consider who you're designing for and developing for, what I touched on earlier, what do your subscribers open your email in? What's the objective of the email? Make sure not to design the email to you just for what you want it to look like, and just consider what your users want as well. and also just to consider what kind of product and service your company is working with. These are very, I'm not trying to patronize, you probably know all this already, but it's just to have that idea within email as well, and it just really does improve your design and development. And again, email is personal, just not to you. So you, like with websites and whatever you do, you're going to spend hours developing this, but then someone might not even open it. It might just be a very, very, very quick impression. How many times today have you gone through your email list and then how long did that person spend designing that email? So, how are you going to grab their attention? Things like emojis could help as well. And that brings me up to extra credit. I did this GIF for my friend Richard, who was supposed to come but didn't. But yeah, he's a massive M. Watson fan. But here's just some articles that I've read in the recent months. It's really helped me with my design. The first one, and development, sorry. The first one is Flexbox without Flexbox. Flexbox has very limited support in emails, but this article is just showing just ways to have more of a flex grid layout, but without actually using Flexbox. Email Design Practices 2017 from Email on Acid. 10 videos all designers should watch. Again, it helps me understand email best practices better, even though it may not directly apply to email, and I promise you they do not mention email. It's really good to then apply that logic to your email designs, and that does help. Spacing techniques in emails, as I touched upon earlier, just using a 5-point grid or a 8-point grid. This one's a bit random, but it's in there. Self-validations, secrets to limited success or limited you can read it. And a really good guide to email by Campaign Monitor. If you are really starting off in email, I'd recommend this one, which really just sums up everything about email. I read it it came out yesterday, and I read it and I thought, wow, I wish I knew about this earlier. And there's a few more. Accessibility in email, just making sure that your email is more accessible to your users. And yeah, and the last one, help my email is broken. You are going to probably say that quite a lot. But then as you do more emails, you're going to find out how to fix things. You're going to preempt yourself and see that this could cause a problem here. You can fix it before you even have the problem. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. Yeah.